button. All right, we are live. Thanks everybody for joining. Promote some more folks here. Yeah, thanks for, oh, here we go. Gotta remember to do that. Thanks for joining this week's OpenJS Foundation Cross-Project Council meeting. Today's the 22nd. And we have a light official agenda, but I've got a couple of things that I wouldn't mind tossing on there as well. But we'll just kind of get into things here. A reminder for folks to add their names to the doc and help take notes if you can. Do we have any announcements before we get into the agenda?
Oh, yeah. Just kidding. So just a reminder that we have our standards working group meeting this afternoon at the 1600 UTC, I believe. And you can see that in the standards working group repo. Also want to take a minute to encourage everybody to still submit a proposal for the Collab Summit, because that's going to be here before we know it. And there's a really awesome lineup for Node+JS Interactive. And it's going to be cold in Montreal, but the warmth of our excitement for OpenJS Foundation projects will keep us, together. So please come and submit a proposal, por favor.
Yeah, if anybody wants to discuss some ideas for the cross-project council, anything that I'd like the higher level, let me know. I'm interested in putting some thought into it as well.
I don't know about the Collab Summit, but for the community corner, it might be good to propose a session on what it is, what's going on, just sort of the awareness, like an awareness session on what it is and like how to get involved. Sure,
that's a great idea. Jory and I have a talk during the conference, but I think it would be good to have a little something at the community corner as well. I don't know if now is the best time to ask or discuss this, but was there an infrastructure meeting that happened recently?
Oh, yes, there was. That was, we had the jQuery infrastructure team met on Thursday of last week. We elected not to record that meeting because we were talking about servers and data that may not want to be public for obvious reasons, security related reasons. I am happy to chat with anybody who wants a brief recap of what we discussed.
And do you think that there are things that could be applicable to other projects and things to build upon from there?
We primarily talked about some critical issues on jQuery project specifically, and some of which you may be seeing on Twitter related to just some broken functionality. So unfortunately, not much that is directly applicable. However, I would, think that the lessons that we're learning in terms of long-term maintenance and graceful deprecation of infrastructure is certainly applicable.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that update. Is it correct that the board meeting is happening this Friday? Is that right?
I believe it's, yes, it's Friday. Yep,
Okay.
25th.
I'll still ask if there's any board updates or anything at that level.
Yes. In terms of the travel fund proposal, I've confirmed there's no concerns or objections, so I've went ahead and landed moving that to stage 3. So that should unlock us actually doing the transfer over. In terms of the update to the project progression, we're doing a vote through email. Don't quite have enough votes yet to conclude that, but hoping that we'll get that relatively soon.
Great.
And then otherwise, probably worth just taking a very quick look at the board. Let me just pull that up to make sure that there's anything else there that we should be talking about. So let me do that.
And while you're pulling that up, it's a good reminder for folks, if you have anything that you think needs to be taken to the board, you can add it to that.
That's right. So right there. So basically we have the proposed charter changes, which is still on that board. And then the only other thing is the process to request legal advice for projects. So that's basically a help wanted tagged issue for writing, like, you know, and documenting how you request legal advice. Although I think, Brian, you actually did I saw a PR for documenting that on the README, right?
Yeah, that should be done. I think that was accepted. Let me just double check. Should be all the way down at the bottom under getting help. Yeah, yep, we can mark that done.
Okay, so let me just, okay. Details were added to the README. README.n. Advice closing. Okay, so that's closed, and I think so. Basically, we've covered everything on the board.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Michael, and others. Anything else before we get into the agenda? Great. So the first thing, and we like I said, we only have a few things on here. We can jump into some boards, and I have a couple of other issues. But the first one on here is administering project applications. As we discussed last week, we're leaving this open to land PR 321, the project progression, which, as Michael said, is close to being approved. But the other point here is like tracking and tooling question that Miles mentioned in his opening description. Do we want to discuss that at all in terms of tooling to manage applications and other activities at the council?
So I had a thought, because related to Miles's issue that he freshly opened, thanks to, sorry for spamming everybody with issues this week on onboarding, but like if we were to create a separate repository for onboarding, would it make sense for that application management function to happen there in a project board on that repository?
That seems to make sense, and I think that Miles' suggestion that we move to an onboarding repo does make sense. That's issue 376, which is one of the things I wanted to bring up. So thank you, Jory. I think that makes sense. That would help. Go ahead.
Yeah, Toby speaking here. If I may add to this, this doesn't work for the quiet period, though. Or the silent period, or however you call it.
True. So it definitely wouldn't solve all the problems.
When I opened the issue, I was specifically just thinking about like the place where we open the issues to keep track of onboarding and potentially document parts of the onboarding process that would be useful for folks. We tend to mostly have kind of policy in this repo. So it could be a good place to kind of, you know, keep track of additional information that's not necessarily policy, but more kind of like good to know information, for example.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be great, and having the issue activity there, I think, would cut down on the noise in the CPC repo too, which would be a good benefit. But do we need to discuss like any sort of other tooling that sort of, you know, enforces SLA aspects to the process and communication or anything like that? Was that overkill?
Well, I think that was going to be a follow-up question is, you know, to what extent does the tooling need to be able to handle like the parts of the application stage which are discrete and the parts of the application stage which, you know, are public?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one thing that can do both? And if no, then, you know, what do we want to do about that?
I mean, have we looked at tools at all?
I mean, I've just mostly very casually, you know, because I mess with these kinds of things all the time between like Trello boards and Waffle and project boards on GitHub. But, you know, I think there are pros and cons to every option. And I'm just really not sure what the things are we want to optimize for.
Yeah, I wonder if we try to survive without the tool for a little bit and see what our pain points are, and then find a tool to address those. I mean, so I'm guessing if I'm envisioning how the process works, you know, somebody applies, we have perhaps an automated response that we've received the application. Some foundation support staff replies to them and gives a more personalized response. We identify a champion and then, you know, lean on the champion to help, you know, to check in weekly and keep the process moving along.
I might be able to help out if I get some time, but I'm not sure. Like, I need to see if I got time to help because I have school and everything. So yeah.
Have you considered having a private GitHub repo for this? I mean, keeping sort of the same tool, but not making it public, and then just basically then transitioning them into public space once the silent period is over.
I feel like we threw that idea out, but I don't know if anybody remembers why. But I like it just because it's sitting on space.
I guess my understanding wasn't that part of it. I mean, my understanding of the original ask was something that would give you reminders and make sure things were progressing. Not
so that things don't fall through the cracks.
Struggling with an email, you know, discussion through email or whatever. It was more around the did we respond within 2 days, and if we didn't, what happened?
Yeah, to add on that, I would say that the issue that I opened specifically about like keeping track of things, I would see as tangential to the other issue about moving things to a different repo. The moving things to a different repo is very specifically just about like making it easier for people to subscribe or filter the things that they, you know, like based on subject areas. Whereas like the tool is very specifically like if we have a project apply, we should all be getting like a reminder email or notifications if we're not keeping up to like an SLA or what our agreements are for a time frame of responding to people, which GitHub does not really have any functionality or features for that.
Right. It's more the kind of things you see in, you know, bug tracking or like, you know, I forget, Bugzilla or whatever, where, you know, you're doing a service desk kind of stuff where it's like, okay, the ticket was opened. If the ticket's not moved into this state within, you know, 2 days, then send an email saying, hey, here's your reminder.
Evan has a comment here. Do you think that the bot at Webpack would be helpful there?
Yeah, so we have this automatic reply bot, whereas you can hook up CI services and everything. So why not just, you know, add that bot as a reply to a comment? Okay, you're gonna get feedback in a couple of days or whatever we need that automated response to be.
Yeah, I guess the applications are currently through email. Does it support that, or is it like it's not? My guess is it's
we
like
can probably host it on a server, and then you just, you know, send out the reply if you get an action. It's just a web server, so or webhook. It's either way, you know. It's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the champion manages an issue related to the project in a private repo and kind of uses that as a log, and if there hasn't been an update, then the bot responds or something. I guess I'm hesitant to layer on too much tooling.
Triggered to a service, sorry. We can definitely host sort of trigger to a service that replies through email. It's not that kind of hard. Just need some research first, probably.
And then you mentioned this being sort of a ticket system, and why not look into like that, like a ticket system like Zendesk or something like that? I mean, there aren't that many people that would actually need a license for it, and that could, maybe be a solution that would work.
Yeah, I have no opinion about that.
I mean, it's a whole new system to bring up and operate would be the downside. I mean, I wonder if like the low tech version is that in every weekly CPC meeting, we ask, the foundation staff to help us by saying, here's our applications, here's when they came in, have we sent a response, have we sent a response email, yes or no? Did we meet our SLA? Like, and we could have the intervals, like, have we gotten back to them? We could review that once in a week. And if you have 2 or 3 applications, that's probably manageable, right? If you got hundreds, you need an automated system, of course, but.
Yeah, do we just set aside the last 10 minutes of the CPC meetings to jump into a private session and just check in on, applications in process or something?
With a specific, and it can have, part of that can be a specific focus on where we're at with the SLAs, because the reality is it's going to be whether our volunteers have had time to do whatever the next step is or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sending it out an email may remind them, or it may not, but.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a great system, especially if you couple it with like a private GitHub board where you have like a board for it, and then you just, you can just move the different projects through the application process, in sort of like a Kanban style.
Yeah, a private board for that does sound quite interesting.
Yeah, the 2 combined, I think would be good.
And since we've agreed the applications are private, potentially, forever or possibly until, they're made public at some later time, having a board versus just having it all in email is actually a pretty good thing, because then we can have checklists and all that kind of stuff in the private repo.
Yeah, it might even be good to just move the conversation to the, an issue in the private repo. I find it easier to digest that sort of stuff than going through email chains.
Yep. Because, then that checklist, like say the quiet period checklist could be there, and, it'd be hopefully easy to find as a reference. And then later on, before the votes and stuff, similar checklists could be in place.
Yep. No, I like this idea. Jordan, you're suggesting a private management repo for each project?
Yeah, I mean, that might be more boilerplate to set up, but like there's a bunch of projects in the foundation, and I am interested in paying attention to some of them, but not all of them. And I imagine other people similarly are, somewhere between all or nothing. So that might kind of help with what Miles was talking about, like being able to more granularly subscribe to things. Obviously, you can still do that per issue in a single repo. But then if you want to be able to follow new issues, you have to subscribe to everything and then unsubscribe. So it's like less burden, I feel, if it's split per repo, because then I can just unwatch the repos I'm not going to care about.
Right, but I most activity for a project should be in the project repos, not in the CPC repo, right? Once you've gotten through the process.
Theoretically, yeah.
And I think we want our CPC members paying attention to all of the applications as they go through that initial process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess if it was just for onboarding, that makes sense. But I guess I'm kind of envisioning that if there are any future non-public foundation related questions, having them on GitHub instead of over email is preferred. And then, I don't know. You could tag the CPC team if you wanted to get everyone. It was just a thought. Obviously, it'll work.
Yeah.
Fine if it's one.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's interesting.
Can I just chime in there?
Yeah.
So I think that anything that reduces notifications is pretty good. Having the possibility to filter out information, it's better to actually pick out the ones you need to focus on rather than having a lot of information. So then you can actually be more effective.
Yeah, GitHub notifications are hard.
Yep.
And for the record, anyone can chime in at any time. I encourage them. So I suggest we, go this kind of low-tech route and then figure out where optimizations are and not prematurely optimize too much. I think we should have, perhaps definitely a private onboarding repo, perhaps a public one as well once they exit the silent period, and we set aside the last few minutes, last 10 minutes perhaps of the CPC meetings to privately just check on where we are. That's what I suggest for starters.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, from an applicant's perspective, that sounds great. And knowing that you actually have like this Tuesday date where people are going to check on the pace of your project, and you will know that something is happening, is actually super reassuring. So I really like that.
Yeah, we should document that. All right, great. I think this was good. I'm glad that we don't have a lot of stuff on the agenda today, so we could really kind of dig into this because I think it's good progress. I'll try to pull out any action items from the notes if anybody else wants to as well. Please do. Thank you. Great. So we'll move on unless anyone has any further thoughts. The next issue on the agenda is responsible security disclosures. And, we've talked about this a couple times. I think where we are right now, and Michael, you can update if you have anything, but basically, is it Marcin in the security working group for Node is going to put together a proposal and we'll go from there?
Yep, exactly. I haven't seen anything new on that yet, but that's the plan.
Great. All right, so not much to talk about there. We'll check back in next week and see if there's any progress. So from there, the next issue is actually to go through the post-bootstrap project board. Before we do, I had a couple of issues that I wanted to bring up, and the onboarding repo was one, the infrastructure update was another. The third one, though, was Project Champion was 352. Let me pull this up somewhere. Issue 352. I think Mateo, is this the one? Yeah. Mateo asks in this issue, in case the project application, the person doing the project application is a member of the CPC, can they be champion, or is there a conflict of interest that we should be concerned about? And Michael Dawson chimed in, but I thought I'd ask the question here to see if anybody had thoughts on whether a CPC member bringing a project to the foundation can also be its champion, or if we think we should separate those two.
I'd say that the champion is more of a support role. So yeah, if someone wants to do more work and is a person qualified for it, go for it.
Yeah, I could go either way. I mean, like Evan says in the chat, to have it separate would seem natural, but I think also, if you're willing to take on the work, I don't see like a conflict of interest or any sort of conflict really.
I mean, I think that in practice there wouldn't be a conflict, but it would kind of neatly sidestep any perception of conflict if they were separate. And that, like, we've already had a project like come in that where external perception has, will continue to be very important. And like, I think it would have been the appearance of conflict of interest there, I think would have been a problem. And it's probably useful to we can decide to make a judgment call on it in the future, but like each time, but it would probably be simplest to just always say it's separate.
Yeah, and also having it separate would mean that you have multiple people involved that it's pretty reassuring that knowing that you're not actually discrediting anything, right? You have a neutral standpoint towards the application. It's not like, okay, since I'm the champion and I'm also applying, it's gonna be hard to have a critical judgment on that project, or it kind of makes it blurry between the lines. So having clear distinctions would probably be good, in my opinion, though.
Yeah, I think you two raised good points.
That's kind of where I was coming from too, is like that there's the potential that it, likely only in perception, but that does matter, that there potentially be some advantage if you're on the CPC and you can propose and champion your own. And having the multiple people involved does have some benefits too. So I don't have a super strong feeling, but that was sort of my gut feeling, that having it be separate would be better.
Hey, Matteo, thanks for joining. We're actually commenting on your issue number 352, asking about project champions of projects that a CPC member might be bringing to the organization. We're landing on the thought that it would probably be best to keep separate, so that if there was any sort of conflict, that it would already be handled, and that perhaps more people working on it, the better.
Yeah, I totally I agree on that stance. Is as good as it just remove confusion. So that problem arises when there could be some confusion. So whatever is the good, so that is not left to the applicant to figure this out. Okay. Because there is a conflict of interest, of course, on somebody that is already part of the CPC, and in sustaining their value by bringing some project in, and on the other side there is also the fact that you need to ensure a fair process. So those two things needs to be balanced out. So a person might not be a good fit, but then the person is not in the best position, essentially. So I totally agree. I totally agree on that stance. The downside of that approach is of course, it creates a little bit more of a little bit more process and a little bit more work, but I think it's good.
Yeah.
I was leaning towards I'm leaning towards that approach myself. So I just didn't want to, to steer the discussion there.
Yep, that's a good question.
Two quick points I want to make for that. The first is, from someone that's not in that position, it's going to look unfair if some projects get through that way.
Can I just chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, basically, if if there are projects that are able to sort of like benefit from having someone on the CPC actually champion their own project, if you're not in that position, you're going to feel like this is unfair, right? So this might sort of create like the impression of a clique from the outside. And so, this is something you might want to consider. And then the other aspect, so I don't know the specifics of that, but my understanding is we had, during the AMP application, a champion change that was to do to related prospective things of that nature. I wasn't privy to the conversations, but I know that we had a champion change. So maybe actually you all looking into that and making sure that whatever lessons happen, you can take from there would be useful to consider for this discussion too.
So I just want to say that having two separate champions or having that distinct, clear separation would mean that it's a system that builds on trust, right? So you know that the process isn't interfered or something like that, and that is kind of reassuring for the rest of people as well. So I think it's pretty important. Even though it's going to be more work for us, it's important to build trust, and that's probably the most important attribute, in fact, of the entire organization.
Yeah, I agree.
So I guess I don't hear anybody who's suggesting anything other than we should make them two separate. Like the requirement, the doc should be updated to say that they need to be two separate people.
Mm-hmm. Plus one of that. All right, no objection. So we'll capture that in the notes. I've got a little note too to if I get a chance, I'll go back and try to update that language. But if anybody else has time, please feel free to jump in there. It'd be a good first issue.
I'll just comment in the issue that we discussed it, and that was the consensus.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent. We can perhaps leave that open until we get the PR in if we want. Either way. Great. Yeah, and like I was saying, that's a good first issue. If anybody wants to jump in and land a change, that'd be awesome. So,
yep.
Great. Great. Thanks for letting me sidetrack the agenda slightly there. I thought that was a good question to dig into. So moving back to the agenda, the last thing that we have is the project board for post-bootstrap work, and perhaps even touch on any other project boards that we have. So this project board is project number 3. Digging in here, the first issue on in progress, which actually is in progress, is the add admin policy docs. And I say it that way because I was working on it this morning. I'm pulling some admin policy docs from the Node Foundation updating them, and we can use that as a starting point for some policy docs for the foundation. Things such as transferring a repo in the OpenJS org, GitHub org management policy, and working group requirements. So I'm hoping that I can land that, or not land it, but open a PR today. The next one in progress, does anybody have any comments or questions about that first one? I assume not. The next one in progress is review foundation infrastructure and rethink how we manage it. I think that we have an infrastructure group informally started, I think. Fair to say informally, I'm not sure. And jQuery is working on theirs. I expect that things will start to be born out of these efforts, and then we'll have some more for this ticket. Does anyone?
I do have one minor update, just in case, because I did it right before we started. Per some conversations we had like 2 weeks ago, I think, I posted a link to the draft services menu for folks to review and comment on, and there's a link to that draft on issue number 333, and then the related one that you posted, Joe, which was 258, I think. So there you go. So take a look, please.
Great. Yeah, one quick question. Any reason why we wouldn't make that a PR? Like,
did we say we wanted it to be PR?
I'm just thinking, like, PRs, people can easily make very concrete, like, suggestions, and then if we're all happy, it can land.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I noticed is there's still a couple people have asked more like foundational questions that we need to get some answers on, and that's harder to highlight in a PR, but I'm happy to make that a PR if that would be, that probably would be easier for everybody.
Okay. And I guess if there are foundational questions, is it worth us talking about those at all? Sometimes a little bit of.
It's a good long list here.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, must the domain be transferred if a project is coming into the foundation? Is it a requirement that its domain is transferred? I'm just going through really quick. But I don't see why those conversations couldn't happen on GitHub too. So I'm happy to move this over unless Brian thinks of any reason why we couldn't or we shouldn't.
I think we had talked about the domain a few times, and that if you don't transfer it, you could get into some strange situations.
Yeah, that's the gist of it, is that one of the things that we've seen in many other projects is that there are concerns about single points of control. And that's one of the things that can, whether it ends up being used as a single point of control or just looks like one, generally contributors are more comfortable when those things become neutral. That's the rationale behind it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think this would be good in the PR. We can comment on different areas and probably get some engagement there and hash some things out and then land it. That'd be great.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily have to resolve everything. Like something may be able to land, and then we can continue discussion on certain topics and stuff. I'm just thinking there's some good information there. If we can get what we do have agreement on landed, that would be great.
Okay, well, I will take that as an action item, and as a next step, I can do that. But also, in the meantime, if you just can't wait, you could read it on the Google Drive.
Great, thank you, Joy. Much appreciated. Great. So there are 3 items in the waiting on the board / foundation, and this reminds me too that I have an action item to break out the board approval required label into 2 labels: a waiting on the board and a board approval required. That I will try to get to soon, so we can differentiate between the 2 where approval is explicitly required and where we're just waiting for perhaps guidance or something. But we have 3 things here. I assume that there's no update on any of these, and we have the meeting happening on Friday and so on and so forth.
You're talking about related to the board?
Yeah, there's project directed funding, update and move the JSF CLA bot, and define and document a style guide for the foundation's name, which I think is in the issue. It's expanded beyond that.
So I guess the second one, Brian, I mean, we are closer in terms of the updated documents, although if I remember correctly, maybe the CLA one will be a little bit later.
Yeah, that's correct. So here's where we are. At this point, we are just looking for input from 2 more board members on the vote on the legal documents, and this is really just more for completeness than anything else. As far as the CLA goes, we did need to make a revision to that over the past week, and that's basically just to reflect the tooling more than anything else. Actually, it was a very kind of a small change, but it was one that I'd like for the board to have some time to review just to make sure they're comfortable with everything there. However, the parts that affect trademark, which I think is really ultimately what we need to be considering here, that has all at this point pretty much gone through. So hopefully next week we'll have a final update for you on that.
Right, and that should unlock the define and document a style guide, right?
You got it. You got it.
Great. Excellent. Good news. So that kind of gets us through this board. I don't know if there's anything to talk about actually on the other 2 boards in terms of onboarding. We kind of talked about some of the processes earlier.
Probably one thing worth just kind of pointing out, so we did add, I did add the issues to the repo for all of our projects, so they all have an onboarding issue now, and those are all on the board. A lot of folks have already kind of been tagged in and have started to work on making the updates they needed, so that was great. The one thing that I had to do, though, to be able to tag project leads who have not been participating in the Bootstrap or CPC group was to create a project-leads team that have triage access. So that's not right, but the ability to update their issue there. And that is how some folks have been added to the repository. I think that's probably a good thing to, keep, because not all project leads want to follow along with the CPC all the time, but it's probably good to be able to tag them on issues that we need to make sure they all see. But happy to discuss other approaches that we could use here, but needed to get that going. So asking forgiveness.
We should probably just document that somewhere. And unless people object to the approach, it would be good to have it documented that says this is how we give access and to that group, and as part of the onboarding or whatever, it should be one of our steps to add them to that list. Because as I understand it, that will allow them to comment, tag, I don't know about close issues.
I don't think that it lets them close issues. I think they can just, label, like add a label or assign themselves to issues. Triage is a newer permission level that I'm not fully familiar with.
Okay.
I'm just looking that up, but like I certainly don't have any concern with that. It seems to be a good way to give people some access.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's also helpful just because knowing who the point person is for a given project, that's something we may need to be able to assess pretty quickly from time to time. So having that, it's already proved a little helpful to Rachel and Robin, and so I'm hoping others will find that useful as well.
Yeah, so they can close, reopen, and assign all issues and pull requests.
Do we want to drop that?
I don't have any concern with that. I was just sharing what's in the list. Because if, for example, you open an issue and tag them with it, them being able to close it seems reasonable, and the downside doesn't seem like, I don't think people are going to go around closing issues that cause problems anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for doing that, Jory, and I think it's a good step. We'll see how it works out. See how we iterate on it. Great. Anything else in terms of onboarding? I'm wondering if we should, like we had decided earlier in the meeting, take the last 10 minutes to discuss, applications or anything that's in process. And Robin says she has some news too that she'd like to share, I assume, publicly.
Yes, absolutely, publicly. We have great news today. The OpenJS Foundation launched the Node.js certification program. It went live this morning. You can all read more, retweet, and I think it's great news for devs and folks who will be looking to hire great talent as well.
Excellent.
So kudos to all the folks who really helped bring it. I know it was a long process, and we had some great partners at the end to help bring it over the finish line, from NodeSource and Nearform and TrueAbility, our LF Linux Foundation training team. So thanks everybody for helping make it happen.
Great. Yeah, thanks everyone. This is exciting news.
Woohoo! It's like years of work, and it's awesome.
Hooray!
Great. Yeah, I even saw there's some people in Slack, commenting on their experience, which I think seemed good. Great. Thank you, Robin. And thanks to everyone. Jordan asks, are there any discounts available to Foundation members? If anyone knows. Rachel, Brian, Robin?
We don't know yet, but we're open to ideas and suggestions.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So should we go into private session and just check in on any applications and such? Any objections to that? No? All right. I will stop the stream, and I will ask folks who are not members or board staff or board folks or foundation staff to drop off if you would, and thank you.